So, which of these two passages do you think is the example of good writing? When I ask students this question, the vast majority choose passage B, but it's not only students who prefer this passage. Let's look at some of the people behind these passages and some people who reviewed them as well, and see what we can learn from these examples. The author of passage A is Judith Butler. She's a philosopher, literary critic, also a UC Berkeley professor. Her passage, a lot of people talked about her writing in this piece, but maybe not for the reasons she would want. It attracted the attention of Dennis Dutton, for instance. He's an art historian, evolutionary psychologist. We'll be hearing from him in our first batch of source material. He's also the creator of a bad writing contest, and he gave Butler's passage the top prize in 1999. A big part of the reason is it's just so hard to read. He described it as impenetrable, like, you just can't get through it. The other passage, though, passage B, that's by Isabel Wilkerson. She's a journalist. It's from a book called The Warmth of Other Suns. She's won many literary awards, including the Pulitzer Prize. Here she is getting the National Humanities Award from someone you might recognize in 2016. And her writing, as well as Judith Butler's, are mentioned in Steven Pinker's book, The Sense of Style. He's a Harvard professor, but what he does is, he does a lot of things. He does cognitive psychology. He's an evolutionary psychologist as well. But he uses his studies in these fields of cognitive psychology and evolutionary psychology to give writers practical advice. His whole point is that if you understand how the brain really works, you can be a better writer. And he uses Butler's and Wilkinson's writing as examples of this. Let's focus on the positives here, though. He talks about these passages, and he makes the point that good writing makes you feel smart when you read it. You feel like a genius, in his words. Bad writing does the opposite. It makes you feel like a dunce, or makes you feel stupid. And that's what he's trying to say about Butler's writing, is that you don't feel very smart after you read it. And by the way, that this passage is it's about political science. I actually have a bachelor's degree in political science, and I have a really hard time understanding this. So does Pinker. His summary is that he thinks Judith Butler is trying to say that power changes over time, but he's not quite sure, and I don't think I'm sure either. Now, in contrast, though, passage B, that really kind of makes you feel smart. It makes you feel like you understand what's going on, hopefully, and there's really a couple things in particular that are happening in this passage that Pinker talks about that are worth us noting. One is that it draws on our evolutionary tendency to prefer visual thinking, right? Where he notes that we're primates. A third of our brains are devoted to vision. We really need to see stuff to understand. And really, if you think about it, the expression "I see" can actually mean I understand, right? Like when you say "I see what you mean," that means I understand you. And Pinker notes how passage B just gives you so many opportunities to visualize. And and the writer Wilkerson is talking about abstract things, right? She's talking about, like, say, immigration. That's broad and abstract, and it's very general. But instead, she mentions something specific that you can picture. Anyone who ever longed to cross the Atlantic or Rio Grande, you can see that in your head. It's like, I see someone standing on the bank of a body of water about to embark on this journey. It's easier to remember. Instead of denial of economic opportunities, we get typists wanting to work in an office and so on. All these things put pictures in our head. Some of them are pretty chilling, right? But quite effective in that sense, too. Pinker just gives more examples of this. People have a much easier time remembering the passages on the right, according to research. We're just giving little visual details, but it puts a picture in the head, and that's associated with memory. And just like I see can mean, I understand, we can do this as writers, right? And you can say stuff like, as we can see, that's a nice way to kind of trigger that sort of visual thinking in readers. There's another great thing going on about passage B, and a problematic thing going in passage A, and that's the use of writing. Pinker notes that we should just use really a backdrop, a frame of simple nouns and verbs with the occasional interesting word placed in there. And here's an example of that. These are really simple words. They each had a decision. They were stuck, right? But then you get a few words in there for flavor, right? Unyielding. Compare that to what's going on in passage A. Here we've got some words that are so rare that Microsoft Word's dictionary does not recognize them as words. All right, and a lot of you won't either, and I don't either. I can't tell you what Althusserian theory is, and I consider myself pretty good with vocabulary. So, what are some takeaways from this? Well, we can all try to be just a little more plain and simple with our language so people can actually understand what we're talking about. And, academia and business and legal writing are all good examples of this. Take a look at these examples. These are all real world writing examples. What do you think the people were actually trying to say? All right, well, take a look at this first one. Participants were tested under conditions of good to excellent acoustic isolation. What? Well, here's what that actually means. Oh, that makes more sense. We tested the students in a quiet room. Management actions at and in the immediate vicinity of airports do little to mitigate the risk of off-airport strikes during departure and approach. Huh? Well, it turns out what that actually means is this. Trapping birds near an airport does little to reduce the number of times birds will collide with a plane as it takes off or lands. Oh, isn't that easier to understand? Don't you feel like you can, take part in this topic of discussion now? Here's the last one. Uh, you know, I don't know. Doesn't this stuff make you feel like, a little smarter? Doesn't this just kind of make you feel kind of dumb? And if this style of writing does make you feel kind of dumb, then maybe we can avoid that, right? Maybe we can try to use simple language and just give our readers visuals that things that they can actually picture in their heads.